My guest today is a former high school science teacher turned genetic counselor, a three-time IVF warrior, and a passionate advocate for informed, empowered birth, especially when it comes to vaginal birth after cesarean, or VBAC. After a traumatic first birth that ended in an emergency cesarean and a NICU stay, she set her sights on something radically different the second time around, a birth defined by autonomy, trust, and healing. But what does that even look like? How do you plan for it? And was she able to pull it off? Especially as the world went into lockdown for the COVID-19 pandemic. I'm pregnancy-focused chiropractor Dr. Elliot Berlin, and you're listening to the Informed Pregnancy Podcast. Natalie Richeimer, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much for having me, Dr. Berlin.
My pleasure. I'm excited to hear your story. It's quite a journey. Let's start at the beginning. Where are you from originally? And how did you get into the line of work that you do?
So I am originally from Toronto, Canada.
Hey.
And 100%. And when people ask me why I moved to LA, I married an LA boy, and LA boys, they can't survive anywhere outside of Los Angeles.
That is true.
We moved out here, and it's a very long story on how I became a genetic counselor, but I'm very passionate about education. I thought for my whole life I would have been an MD, a doctor. And then part of my grand plan of getting into medical school was to do teaching for a few years, very passionate about education. Fell into teaching, women in STEM, loved it. But I'd always kind of felt like there was a journey that was missing for me, medicine wise, and really just couldn't really figure out what that was. And an MD just didn't feel like the right thing for me. And we can talk a little bit more about it later. But essentially, when I went through IVF, I found out very young that I had infertility and that I would be able only to have children through IVF. I met a lot of genetic counselors really along the way. And it kind of clicked like an aha click for me. And that, like, oh, this is what I'm supposed to do. I'm supposed to be in medicine and I'm supposed to be a genetic counselor. And it was really only when I got pregnant with my second child that I had felt like, okay, I'm going to be a mom of two if I don't go back to grad school at this point. I'm 6 years into teaching at this point. I'm never going to do it. So I applied to graduate school. I did my interview 9 months pregnant. I always say I was probably the most memorable person at the interview and have really loved it ever since. And it really came from a passion for advocacy and for medicine.
So when you said you met genetic counselors during your fertility journey, meaning you met them professionally, like they were counseling
as a patient. Yeah.
And it had a big impact on you.
Yeah.
All right, let's talk about that first birth. So you overcame your fertility hurdles, got pregnant. How was the pregnancy and what was your plan for birth?
So, looking back, I've been doing a lot of looking back retrospective. Yeah, I was at the time, I thought I was super old having my first baby at 25. I was joking with my OB at the time. I'm an old mom. I was very young, very, very young. A lot of people in my circle of, friends and family have had kids really young. So 25 felt like so old to me, was not. But, looking back, a lot of my confidence in myself as a person was taken away from me through IVF and through infertility. And it's a big theme that I thought about. I couldn't get pregnant on my own. And the only way I was going to get pregnant was with serious amounts of intervention. And I needed to blindly trust the doctors and do whatever they said to get and stay pregnant. And so that was kind of the mentality or mindset that I went in with that first pregnancy. And I would, being Canadian, we are great people, but we don't necessarily all question medical authority. And so whatever the doctor said to me was fine. I had heard on the grapevine of all your friends and mother's friends and mother-in-law's friends who've had babies that I didn't want to have a C-section. I knew that. I didn't really understand why, but everyone was like, don't have a C-section. But no one tells you how to have a successful vaginal birth. So I just figured it'll happen for me. I hired a doula because that's apparently what you do. You hire yourself a doula, you want to have a vaginal birth. And interestingly enough, my own mother had 5 kids. I'm one of 5. All of her babies were induced, and all of them, she didn't do pain medication. She had her babies 80s and 90s. It was very out of vogue. So I
Wow.
knew that I shouldn't do pain. Yeah, exactly. I knew I shouldn't do pain medication. That's what I knew. I was like, no pain meds, vaginal birth. Cool. Hire the doula. I had no idea what that meant. And the doula at the time did not prepare me. So, I go into this first pregnancy with a lot of trepidation. I had had a very early loss prior to this pregnancy. So with IVF, especially if you've had loss before, you don't really breathe until you have a baby in your arms. You're always waiting for the other shoe to drop. And that was that pregnancy for me. And there were things that had popped up in the pregnancy. So I had polyhydramnios, which means a lot of extra fluid for those who don't know, at a little high risk. And there were other things that they were watching for that had made me, I would say, like low high risk. So I was being extra careful monitored. And when I had gotten to 39 weeks, they were very, very clear that I was not allowed to go further than that. They had felt the MFM and the OB that we were really, playing with fire and that I should be induced at 39 weeks. Again, I had no idea what that meant. I knew my mom was induced and had successful birth. So I was like, okay, that's what the doctor told me to do. And I have this doula and it's going to go great. And I was induced from zero, which meant I went in and I did cervidil and I went in and I did a Foley balloon. And no one tells you that a Foley balloon is like literally, for me at least, one of the most painful things in the world. So I had made it about 4 centimeters, so much pain. I was like, you know what? Okay, fine. Let's do this walking epidural. Did the walking epidural, had felt great, even felt like, okay, like let's dial it down. It's even a little heavy for me. And really, to the credit of my OB, like I had a very slow but progressing labor. And baby was descending and things were going slowly, but they were going really well. And I had gotten to the place where I was pushing in my labor. I was at 10 centimeters. I was pushing and baby was showing some decel. So the heart rate was decreasing and was really showing that he wasn't tolerating labor so well, but it was fine. I was pushing. And then at a certain point in labor, again, things happened very, very quickly. And he was very far down. Like from what I was told, again, like it's hard to know everything after the fact. He flatlined, meaning his heart completely gave out. Yeah, it was like
Still
my
inside
husband
you.
still, I'm pushing. I have the whole like called code. So I had like 1,000 people around me. I'm pushing. I don't know what's happening. This is something I remember and it will stick with me for the rest of my life. My husband is the most calm, positive person. I am like a very anxious and not always positive person for myself. And I just remember him looking at me like with the saddest look of like, this is really not good. So I was like in the movies, scene, wheeled away to the OR. Like there was no conversation. It was like, we need to do this C-section now. My OB, who is a really soft-spoken woman, I just remember her yelling like, anesthesia needs to be here now. We need to switch the bag now or we're putting her under. They got in, like it was running and chaos. And it was so fast. My husband wasn't able to scrub in. So I was by myself, like too graphic and gory, but like I was throwing up on myself. I had no idea what was happening. My OB told me later she cut out the baby in 60 seconds flat. And this whole time, which seemed like hours, but really was like minutes, I didn't know if my baby was alive. I didn't know what was going to happen. I had no idea. I just knew I was feeling in a lot of pain and throwing up on myself. And then I heard my son crying, which was the most relieving sound in the world. And then my husband was finally allowed in. He scrubbed in. He went with the baby. And off they went to NICU together, and I went to the PACU.
By
Um,
yourself again.
by myself again. I remember there were like the nurse and the anesthesiologist were sitting like charting, and I thought I was literally dying. And I remember hearing them say like, she's in so much pain. Her heart rate's really slowing down. We can't give her any more, but her blood pressure's really high. Like she might stroke out. I remember they're talking like about you while you were
You're
there
right there.
while you're right there. I remember like dialing my husband on the phone. I was like, babe, I'm dying. He's like, you're not dying. You're fine. I'll see you in a minute. Because, you got to be the positive person. It was just like a horrible, horrible thing. And again, like just for context for people who are listening, the baby was so far down. I just remember hearing like, he's really far down. We need to push him back up. Yeah, it was bad. And I ended up getting vaginal stitches and C-section stitches. So I said it's stitches in two
Oh my
places.
goodness. You got the
Yeah.
I don't know, Mother's Day special.
Well, got to keep it real. But that was the story of my first birth. And
And
the
then the baby
healing,
went to NICU.
the baby went to NICU, what was always supposed to be 2 hours, which turned out to be 8 days. And we joked as a family, like when they let him go, we literally ran to the parking lot because we're like, they're going to find a reason to keep him. Like, run,
Wow.
run.
Two questions before we take a break, and then I want to find out after the break more about what your postpartum was like. Did they figure out why the baby was flatlining, and also why did the baby need to stay in the NICU for so long?
Such a good question. So the baby was flatlining because he wasn't tolerating labor. That's what I was told at the time. Like we look back and everything is 2020, but like, being induced from zero can be stressful on anybody. And he's a person. And, I have my thoughts and feelings, but that's what I was told. And he was totally fine. The baby was sent to NICU initially. If anyone's ever had an emergency C-section, the NICU team is sent there and they do preliminary tests. And one of them was to look for acid in the blood, which can be a sign of a metabolic disorder. And he scored slightly high, like it was slightly high, and they wanted to observe him for an hour. That was what we were told. And like when my husband was admitted, the nurse was like, "You're going to be with your wife really soon." Like this is just very standard, very routine. If anyone has been a NICU parent or has had a child in the NICU, once you're in the NICU, you're hooked up to all sorts of monitors and machines. And what had happened was like this, he was hooked up to what's called a Holter monitor or a heart monitor. And the rule in NICU is every time there's an incident, so meaning your heart skips a beat or it goes a little fast, which is normal for any of us. If you put any of us on a Holter monitor, we would skip a beat. The clock sets back 24 hours.
Oh my gosh, how do you ever get out?
You have to have a lucky 24 hours. So that is the short and long story. They had some concerns about his heart, which ended up he was totally fine and everything was great, but they had really scared us with him there. And so, we got to enjoy the NICU, which again is both the most special and horrible place.
Let's take a little break. When we come back, we'll find out what postpartum was like for you in your mind, body, and spirit. Welcome back. We're talking to Natalie Richeimer. So, you had a vision for the birth, you had a doula, and it didn't go according to plan. Baby was not tolerating labor, the induced labor, well at all. And then it turned into what sounds like a true emergency cesarean, and then just over a week in the NICU. That means I assume that you went home without your baby. And I think that postpartum is a challenging transition for most people, even when birth goes great, even when it's not a surgical recovery, even when you get to take the baby with you. What was those early days of postpartum like for you?
I mean, just like honestly horrible. Like like leaving a hospital without a baby is probably one of the most horrible things that somebody can go through. And, not knowing if your baby's going to be okay is very scary. And then to come home and you've had your first baby and to just be going back and forth to a hospital to visit said baby while you're supposed to be recovering was horrible. I will say for me, and we'll talk about this in the post of this journey, I don't like pain medication. I don't like the way I feel on it. I don't like getting my teeth, numbed at the dentist. And I was on some very heavy painkillers. And I just say this to my husband now. I don't remember the first 8 weeks after I had the baby.
Wow.
Like I know they happened. I have pictures and I have very vague memories, but I don't remember my son. I just remember being in incredible amounts of pain. And then on top of that,
Surgical pain or
surgical pain. And then also the pain comes with like breastfeeding for the first time without your baby there and having to navigate a pump and medications. And yeah, and I was in like vaginal pain as well because I had had
you had
stitches
stitches
there.
there too. And with
Yeah.
all that, it's sort of like normally the recommendation is go rest, but you're running back and forth between home and hospital. Can't really even imagine how intense that must have been. And apparently you blocked a lot of it out.
I mean, I distinctly remember telling one of the doctors, because again, I was highly medicated at the time. Like, I know what you're saying. I know they're saying words, but I don't understand the word. Like, they're not going in. My husband, can you explain I don't understand what she's saying. So yeah, I mean, I don't know if I blocked it out. I don't know if the pain medication just altered my reality so much that I couldn't like process, but it was really horrible.
Down the road, you decide to have another baby. Is that a new IVF or you pluck one from the freezer?
And from the same batch as my first batch, which was very lucky of us, and decided, after the trauma of my first birth, I really was very clear with my husband that he's very big believer in siblings. He's like, our son's going to be a weirdo if he doesn't have a sibling. We need to have a sibling. I'm like, I don't know. And I said to him, listen, I want to have another baby, but my deal with you is like this. If this is another C-section, I will never have more children. Like, this will be my last, and I want you to understand and respect that. He's like, I totally respect that.
Can I just get into your mind for a second? I mean, your C-section was overly traumatic compared to, let's say, an average C-section, right? So, was the surgery itself, or was it the very traumatic nature of your particular situation? What about it was one more C-section and I'm done?
I mean, it was very horrible, to be honest. It was a 38-hour labor that ended in a C-section, which was like physically exhausting. I had stitches in two places. The recovery was not great. And like the trauma of like feeling, and I hope this is not too graphic, you can cut it out if it is, but like feeling someone slice open your abdomen and not being prepared for that and never feeling like that in the world, it was horrible.
Again, I only wonder,
Yeah.
this is not my expertise at all, if any of that was extra traumatic because of the time crunch, right? Baby's flatlining. She had the baby
Yeah,
out in 60 seconds. No time to like feel around, make sure you're totally numb, you know.
for sure. And that's definitely it. And like that was always explained to me, like, you just had a really bad C-section. Like, not all C-sections are like that. And I've heard that. But again, my experience around that was so horrible. My experience also in the hospital, like, I didn't talk about that much, but I had felt like the nurses were like nasty with that particular birth, like during that induction. And induction's a hard process, and they were nasty. The staff was nasty. It was just all around horrible and really like it's just the thought of it. Like I was like, if it has to happen, it has to happen. I accept that, but I don't ever want to do that again.
Interesting. Okay, so I'm not questioning you, like why. I'm just curious about what the thought process was. And I mean, I'm not judging it. I'm just asking why. And also, you sometimes see people have that type of first experience and they run the other way. They're like, I want to have another baby, but I'm not trying vaginal birth again. I'm just going to go for the much more controlled, elective scheduled cesarean. So you went the other way. But I mean, how do you prevent this from happening again? What was the plan on round two?
So, I had a great conversation with my provider about VBAC. She herself has had VBAC, so she was very supportive. And really what she had said from the beginning was, this was a clear situation where it wasn't a you issue, it was a baby issue, right? Like you had a C-section because we were saving your son's life, not because there's something anatomically, blocking you from having a vaginal birth. Controversial, I know, but that was what she had said. You're an excellent candidate for a VBAC. You progressed, you got to 10 plus 3, pushing, all that. So that
That
was,
is true. That's something to keep in mind. You were very close to just pushing your baby out. So that's one piece. So it sounds like you're saying your doctor was saying this is not expected to be a recurring event.
barring lightning striking twice, you are a really good candidate for VBAC. You can also elect for a cesarean. Again, like the pain medication, the recovery was horrible. Like I didn't want that. And it's interesting. I had one of my best friends growing up. She has an older sister who lives in New Jersey, and she has, I believe, 7 or 8 kids. And her first 3 births were a C-section, and she was able to VBAC with the last 5,
Wow.
4 or 5 next level. And she became a VBAC doula, specifically specializing in VBACs. And I had called her on the phone when I had gotten pregnant with my second child. And her name is Panina. Shout out to Panina if you're listening. And I said, Panina, like, I can't do a C-section again. And it was the first person who validated to me. And she was like, Natalie, I understand exactly what you feel like. I told my husband after the third cesarean, I'm not having any more kids unless I can do it vaginally because I was so horrible. And she really gave me the education and the empowerment to get to a place where I understood what I needed to do to have a VBAC. And I don't think that was ever Like when we talk about my first birth reflecting, I was like, oh, I really want a vaginal birth. Like, okay, but like, how do you do that? What is that going to look like? How are you going to prepare yourself? She had given me a lot of tools. She
Kinds
wasn't in
of
LA.
things.
I mean, the first thing was just being very honest with me about what VBAC looks like in this country and that everyone is a VBAC doctor in theory, but let's see if your doctor is really a VBAC doctor. Like you need to make sure and scope out if she's legitimately going to give you a decent chance.
By asking people who have birth with them or by asking specific questions?
Asking specific questions for her related to induction and related to, just other things as well, like pain management and et cetera. And the other thing she was very frank with me about, and I think it was very helpful, was saying, like, listen, girl, the cards are stacked against you when you want to be back because there is this underlying fear, whether it's, justified or not, is a different conversation of uterine rupture. And the hospital is scared of liability and you're going up against that. And you need to come at this with no pain medication. That is going to be your best shot. If that was a big thing she said, and you need to go into labor naturally.
How did
That's
you
the
feel about
second
that? I
best.
mean, you were planning to do unmedicated the first time anyway.
I was planning, and it's interesting. Like, how did I feel about that? I wasn't happy at the beginning because I was like, "What do you mean?" She was like, "I'm going to be honest with you." She was like, "Anything you take intervention-wise stacks cards against you. So you can have a VBAC with pain medication. It just makes it less likely. You can have a VBAC with an induction. It just makes it less likely. If you want your best shot, you need to go into labor naturally, and you need to do it without pay meds." And I think I was nervous, but I was also like very empowered hearing that she had done it. And also just like she was like you can do that. Your body can handle this. Like
Was your doctor on
your
board with that plan?
complicated question. Anyone who's had a VBAC knows that she's an amazing person, but there's a good deal of negotiating you have to do with VBACs. And so she's very on board with no pain medication. What she had wanted me to do precautionary was to put a port in my back for epidural. That people know if they put that port in, they've got to test it and test to see if it's working, which means you're going to get some pain meds. So she was not a fan of the plan of no ports. And she was not a fan of the plan of waiting longer than necessary, meaning after 39 weeks, I think she would have wanted an induction. And that did come to be. With that particular pregnancy, we had a lot of negotiating. And I felt like I was calling my VBAC doula in New Jersey, and she was like coaching me, like, here's what you say. Okay. Here's what you say. Kick the can down the road. She's not serious. And then, like, her being like, this is what I think. So I felt like I was caught in between a custody battle.
So, quasi on board with your plan for VBAC. How did it unfold?
It unfolded like this. I was so excited about to be back. And then I got hit at about 12 weeks. And from the beginning of the pregnancy, I was having little bleeds. And at about 12, 13 weeks in that first trimester scan, I had a complete placenta previa. I
Oh,
can't remember
wow.
if it was complete or partial, but it was placenta previa. And it was like automatic deconversation shutdown. Like you can't have a VBAC. You are not going to have one. You're going to have a C-section. Like accept that it's going to be 37 weeks. And I was really upset, but I was like, okay, it's fine. This will be my last baby. It's going to be a plan. And my husband was like, it's going to be so much better. We planned. And then the baby did something interesting. My second child, so he's an interesting guy. The placenta moved at about 20 weeks, totally in a great spot. So now we were like, yay, we're eligible. But then we had other problems. So the placenta started to peel
Oh,
in little
how
abrasions.
far into the pregnancy?
So I was having bleeds throughout, but the bigger bleeds started, I would say, in like 20 something and above
Ugh.
weeks. So yeah, it was really scary. I remember the first time it happened. I distinctly remember I was in the kitchen cooking soup and I was like, did I just pee my pants? And then I go to the bathroom and I'm like soaked in blood,
Oh my
run to
gosh.
the ER. And, that became the first of quite a few hospitalizations
Oh,
for
what a
for
nightmare.
many placental abruptions. So again, it was like, you're not going to have a VBAC. There's going to be a complete abruption. That's what's going to happen. And we're going to C-section you.
We
And
should probably throw in, we used a few terms, uterine rupture that you
yeah,
mentioned earlier. So the idea here is that after a cesarean birth, your uterus has a scar on it. And aside from everything else, it gets cut open. The uterus gets cut open, baby comes out, and then the uterus is repaired. But that repair spot is not exactly how it was. And there's tissue that's different than it was where the scar is. And the concern is that during the throes of labor, while pressure builds up inside the uterus during contractions, maybe that scar will separate, either thinly separate or literally pop or uterine rupture, which could be a significant medical complication. Then you said placenta previa, which is where the placenta for your second pregnancy was sitting down at the bottom of your uterus over your cervix. And pretty much everyone agrees that if the placenta stays there covering your cervix, then it's probably a better idea to have a cesarean birth than to try to birth through the placenta, rupture the placenta while the baby's still inside you. And then now placental abruption is where some or all of the placenta pulls off the wall of the uterus where it's nestled in, doing its job interfacing between you and the baby. And so you had a partial, it sounds like, placental abruption that caused some bleeding, which is how you knew about it. And then you had several more during your third trimester.
Yeah. And the bleeds progressively got worse. So like the idea was, it's like kind of, we live in California, right? We were waiting for the big one. And they had said to me, so they said to me, the resident had said to me, he's like, they're getting worse. What's going to happen is one is going to get really, really bad. Like the placenta will completely detach and you'll have 10 minutes to get here before you and the baby both bleed out, which is scary with LA traffic. I can joke now, but it wasn't so simple at the time.
Yeah.
And you know what? God is good. And he was wrong. And I got to about 35 weeks. And then this crazy thing happened called COVID. The
I
world shut down.
remember that.
The world shut down and things really stabilized. And I got the green light from my MFM and my OB to try for a VBAC at like 35 weeks, which was crazy,
Did
insane.
COVID make it crazier somehow?
Did COVID make it crazier? I mean, yes and no. Yes, in the sense that I was terrified to go to the hospital. I had never been a gal for home births, but I was like, you know what? I want a home birth. And my MFM was like, no way in hell. He was like, you're going to the hospital. I was like, but no. So that was the kind of the stress and the craziness that we had. It also made it interesting and it was a real blessing in disguise that I could only have one person with me in the room. Like it could be my husband or like a birthing support person, like a doula, but I had to choose. You know, everyone told me at least, if you want to have a vaginal birth, you have to have a doula. Can't do without that. And I was like, yeah, if it's between my husband and a doula, especially with what happened last time, I choose my husband every time. So I was like, you're my birthing support person.
And
Start
your
watching
doula
YouTube
wasn't
videos.
local, right?
Well, my VBAC doula was in New Jersey, and that was a whole other thing. I couldn't fly her out. I said I would fly you, all expenses paid, nice hotel, and she couldn't fly at that point. So, like I said, I wasn't hiring someone here, and I would only have had him anyways. Like if it came between my husband
Your
or
husband.
anyone else, always my husband.
Okay, one more question before we take a break. You said both the OB and the maternal fetal medical specialist signed off on the VBAC. Were there parameters around that sign off? Like it has to be by X amount of time or things like that?
Yes. So the MFM signed off. Funny, like things you don't remember. I just don't remember him towards the end of the pregnancy. Once he signed off, he's let go by. And my OB wasn't putting parameters, but because this placenta had really given us like a lot of hell, I would say like almost day one, she was very concerned that it was showing signs of calcification. So she did not want to go past 39 weeks. And that was part of our grand negotiation.
So if you go into labor spontaneously by around 39 weeks, then VBAC. But if you go longer, then is it induction or is it automatic C-section?
No, induction. She was very willing to try, but she was like, you need to be induced. Like, I'm not comfortable. I don't think she wanted even me to go past 38 weeks at the time. But like, I'm, Jewish and I celebrate a holiday called Passover. And I was like, I can't do it over Passover. It's too crazy for me, my in-laws, blah, blah, blah. So I was like, no, no, no. We've got to wait until after Passover. So I think like we kept kind of kicking the can down the road
Your
at
VBAC
38
doula
weeks.
wanted you to anyway.
And that's what she kept saying to me. She's like, if it was real serious, she'd make you go now. She'll give you more time. It's not real serious, which was like, again, it's very empowering for me because, like I said, I have very blind trust in doctors. And, hearing a different perspective and giving you the words to question and then understand was very helpful to me.
All right, let's take a commercial break. When we come back, we'll find out how things went. Welcome back. We're talking to Natalie Richeimer after a traumatic first birth, cesarean, a real emergency C-section. She went into her second birth hoping really hard for a vaginal birth after cesarean, so much so resigned to the fact that if it was another C-section, it was going to be her last baby. And a lot of little things came up. Placenta previa could have ruled her out, but then the placenta moved. Partial placental abruptions were a problem, but then they eased up and COVID moved in. But nonetheless, her doctor and MFM pretty much signed off on a VBAC as long as the baby were to come by 39 weeks. Natalie, how did it go down?
So there we were at 38 weeks, and I felt like a lawyer, prime negotiations. And we got to a point, it was prior to the first, that holiday, the last part of the holiday. And she was like, listen, she was like, I am not letting you leave here until we schedule this induction. And I was like, fine, let's schedule it for Friday. The holiday's over. On Thursday night, I can drop my kid off at my in-laws because I had another child at this point. Like, let's schedule it for them. And she was like, fine, deal. But like, you are, that's no more. Like, we can't do this anymore. That I think would have been like right around the 40-week mark. And called the VBAC doula, and she was like, you have 3 days to get into labor on your own. Do everything on my list, like everything. She was very positive. She was like, if it comes to it, right? Like, if you're induced, you're not going to be induced at 0 this time. We're going to do other things, and you're going to make it so that your body is, ready to roll. Starting 36 weeks, I was doing all the things she had told me to prep my body for labor. So again, very different than my first time around. And important to mention that at that appointment, my doctor was like, I can do a membrane sweep also. It was like 2 centimeters. And I was like, you know what? Membrane sweep, cool. Like, if you're going to induce me anyways, and this will give me a chance, let's do it. And I, left her office on Tuesday and went into labor naturally on Wednesday. So all that good stuff kind of paid off. My labor was, I would say, not difficult, like just regular. I was at home, and my first labor was 38 hours. So I was like, I have so much time and I hate the hospital. I remember telling this to my husband, I'm only going to go to the hospital if I see blood or water. Like, if my water breaks or if there's bleeding, that's when we'll go. But otherwise, we're staying home. And it was the pandemic. And I just remember we were like eating dinner. He was eating dinner, and like, I just couldn't sit. She's like, do you want to eat? I was like, just go away. Like, I can't talk to you. And I'm like, there's no way like I'm in active labor, because I'm like, I've only been doing this for like 3.5 hours. Like, no, there's no way. And he's like, let me call the doctor. Calls her. She's like, the way she's sounding and the timing of the contractions, you need to leave now or you're going to deliver the baby. So we were like, okie dokes, let's go to the hospital. This is April 2020. This is like height of the pandemic. We get to the hospital. At the time, the policy was like the partner had to wait in the parking lot until they were being like admitted, like not triaged, which was insane. So we get there, and I just remember I was like, I can like talk, and I'm being triaged, and they're like, what's your religious preference? I was like, I don't know, but I feel like if I have a baby, like, and they're like, oh, honey, this is a VBAC. You're going to be here for at least 12 to 24 hours. Like, it's going to be long. And I'm like, I don't know. And then finally someone comes in to check me, and they're like, oh, she's 7.5. We need to admit her now.
Oh, well, that must have been a good piece of news.
It is and it isn't, because I was like, what? I was 7.5. She's like, you're going to have a baby like now. And I was like, oh, I need drugs. I was like, I can't do this. And she's like, it's too late for drugs. Like, you're having this baby. You're moving quickly.
And your
God bless.
husband's
Like,
still not there?
my husband's in the parking lot because the
Oh,
security guard had changed security guards, didn't see him enter with a pregnant lady, thought he was like trying to storm the building. And then the nurse had to literally go down there and was like, you need to let him in. His wife is about to have a baby. He came in, he was there during, the pushing and the last parts, like from when I was admitted to when I had my son was 45 minutes. So
oh,
it's
wow.
really fast, really
Yeah.
fast. And I had me a beautiful baby boy nice healthy weight, which was crazy because of his placenta, but clearly his placenta was doing what it needed to do. And even with the craziest of circumstances, had the most really magical birth.
And unmedicated at that. So VBAC doula got her way. What was that moment like when the baby came through you, being so present?
It's funny. I don't know if I'd use the word present because anyone who's birthed naturally, it's like very out of body. But it was like the most empowering, healing thing that I've ever done. Having had so much anger and distrust towards my body for so many years, seeing what my body could do for me and seeing how my body, even in the hardest of circumstances with that placenta and all the other jazz, literally delivered me a beautiful, healthy little boy. It was like the best thing in the world. And like not feeling cloudy with pain medication and being able to hold him and being able to walk after, where I was just like, this is awesome. Like, where have I been all my life? Like, I'm a new person. I am reborn. It was all the things.
So many things that you went through. I'm just thinking about with the surprise fertility journey, an early miscarriage, a pregnancy that, you know, you felt old, maybe because you were at it for a few years already. And in your circles, people do start having babies pretty young. And then that really traumatic birth experience and really the courage to get pregnant and do it again and all the little hiccups along the way. Even though you said it quickly when you're like, yeah, and then the baby came out, I was like filled with all sorts of feels. So I can't imagine what it was like for you. Congratulations, Mazel Tov. Exciting that you did it again and had another VBAC. So does that mean that the shop remains open?
I'm like very 8 weeks postpartum. I don't think
Too
about now
soon.
having another baby too soon. So that, like I said, my husband said to me, he's like, you didn't have another C-section. That means, if the rule is, I was like, yeah, I know, but not now. Um,
How did these experiences change your work?
Listen, I think it's changed the way we've talked, you and I together, about how I viewed medicine a lot from a patient perspective. The feeling of loss of control and the loss of autonomy. It's something that I experienced, even with me being a tenacious, really loudmouth, aggressive person for VBAC. Even I experienced that when I went, for this last baby and for pretty much all three boys. So when I look at patients, I think like I would say staunchly an advocate for autonomy, making sure that they feel empowered to make choices. I am not being directive in my care and really giving them good information, not just saying do this, but explaining why this is something I'm recommending and respecting their choice to decline and not demonizing people for choices that maybe I don't understand but work for them.
Do you think those would have been harder for you, elements harder for you in terms of patient care, had you not had these personal experiences?
This is such a good question. I don't know. I don't know. I think the experiences I've had have shaped me into what I think is a really good provider. And I don't think I would be the same. I think my view of obstetrics is also very different. My area of specialty in genetic counseling is reproductive. So I see people who are pregnant or trying to get pregnant. A lot of empathy for people who are going through fertility processes because I've been there. I also have a lot of empathy for people who are going through a pregnancy that isn't going the way they planned, because that was, I would say, three out of three of my pregnancies didn't all go the way I planned. And just holding space for that. I don't know if I could be the same person
With
without having gone through what I went through.
with everything you've gone through and, I guess somewhat of your insight from personal experience and professional experience, like, is there a takeaway piece of advice you would give to people on the pregnancy journey?
Yeah. I mean, two pieces. The first is for all my VBAC mommies or attempting to VBAC mommies, because we are a special group. We are a special unicorn group of people. People tear people down a lot who are trying. Again, this has been my experience. Hopefully, everyone has had different experiences than me, but people tear them down a lot. And you face a lot of adversity to just be given the chance. That's the problem. Stay strong, find people who empower you, find people who've done it successfully, and listen to those people. Surround yourself with positive energy and know that you can do it and you should be given a shot like everyone else. To those who are just on their own pregnancy journey, it's similar to with the VBAC community, really knowing what you want, especially if it's your first pregnancy, and really figuring out how am I going to get there. So I want an unmedicated birth. What does that mean? How do I prepare myself? I think one of the biggest problems with my first birth was that I had wanted these, lofty things like a vaginal birth and unmedicated, and I was not given the tools by my doula, by my OB, by really anyone on how to achieve that. And it's like breastfeeding. People are like, it should come naturally. And like, it's hard for some people. And, I took a class at Cedars. I did all the things. I checked things off on the list, but like, I didn't have any, pain management techniques. I didn't have any idea what labor looked like. And so like, educate yourself and empower yourself. And like, also don't be scared to say no because it's your body and you're the only one that walks home with it at the end of this experience. No one else.
Did you end up listening to One Way or Mother?
I listened to part of it. I'm not all the way through yet.
All right. I don't want to ruin anything.
Don't spoil.
That's
No
our
spoilers.
sister podcast. Season 1 is, in fact, a VBAC story. All right, Natalie, thank you so much for sharing your powerful and deeply personal journey. It's a journey from trauma to transformation, and your story is a reminder that birth isn't just a medical event, it's a pivotal moment of identity, of trust, and of growth. And each one was like that for you in different ways. I really appreciate you sharing. Where can we find you online?
You can find me online at Lots of Breatha. It'll be posted in the show notes, but that's my Instagram handle. And feel free to follow me. The account is private, but accept you if you want to follow typically. So yeah, feel free to connect if you're a VBAC person as well.
Thanks so much. And at home, thanks for listening. If this episode resonated with you, please share it, leave us a 5-star review in the app, and explore more empowering content at informedpregnancy.com and on our streaming platform, Informed Pregnancy Plus, and our other podcasts that we just mentioned, One Way or Mother. You can find all of it from informedpregnancy.com.
Doctor, give me the news. I got a